Afternoon lemonade. In spite of modern conveniences such as air conditioning, it is a long-standing Southern tradition to endure the late summer heat in person. The more mature folks sit and suffer the fading afternoon from their porch chairs and swings. They sit. Some actually swing and sip iced tea with a sprig of mint or lemonade made from real lemons. The average conversation is a brilliant exercise in minimalism while beads of condensation languidly form on the ice-filled glasses. The air is filled to the point of bursting with the call of the annual cicadas. It's a pervasive sound that seems to emanate from every direction at once, leaving the listener with no avenue for escape. The teenagers find that loitering in groups in parking lots of grocery stores or fast food restaurants works for them, as well as the porch swings of their elders. The hard thumping of heavy bass crossed the expansive yard to the slightly frowning faces of the older generation. The teens sat on the hoods and trunks of their cars, parked on the side of the road at the end of the driveway. They drank sodas and smoked cigarettes while they held their private conversation masked by the roar of the radios. "Did y'all attend the parents' meeting this afternoon?" asked Miss Prunella from the swing, seated next to her husband of many decades. Miss Prunella sipped gingerly at her iced tea, taking care not to smudge her carefully applied lipstick. Her blued hair still held its carefully coiffed style as she swung slightly. Its weekly update at the local beauty shop held up to the heat and humidity. Her son and his wife sat across from her and Grandpa George. They had all dressed appropriately in cool linens and cottons. Their light-colored clothing contrasted with the familiar black standard of the modern teenagers at the roadside. "We did, Miss Prunella," Miss Mary Ellen responded. "The vote was unanimous. All the parents agreed with you and Grandpa George. It's time for all the parents to have that special talk with all the teenagers." "'Bout time," was Grandpa George's contribution to the conversation. "Did you make sure everybody had the proper recipe?" Miss Prunella asked. "Yes, ma'am. Robert was a dear and made a copy at work for everyone. He handed them out right after the vote." Miss Mary Ellen patted her husband politely on the knee and smiled lovingly at him. He smiled and nodded back. "It's plain time to explain life to these children before they get themselves into—" Miss Prunella paused as she searched her aged mind for the proper euphemism. She nodded and she found the word. "Complications of a family nature." All four of the adults nodded in agreement and continued to swing for a few moments while the radios pumped out their rhythmic noise from the roadside. Miss Mary Ellen finally broke the silence. "Robert will have our talk with Betsy Sue tomorrow afternoon when she gets home from school. It is Friday tomorrow, after all. Betsy Sue will have time to, think about everything over the weekend." "'Bout time," Grandpa George chimed in on the final word on the topic. Betsy Sue kissed Donnie heavily and passionately for several minutes before breaking free of the desperate lip lock. She looked deeply into his eyes and said, "Pick me up about 7. The folks want to go have some kind of family dinner tonight." "Sounds good. My folks want to do the same. I wonder what these old people are all up to. Must be about graduation coming up." "Must be," Betsy Sue agreed as she kissed him quickly and got out of the car. She bumped the door closed with her hip and waved to him as the car pulled away. She began walking up the drive. As she looked towards the house, she could see her parents already out on one of the swings. Betsy Sue groaned to herself and rolled her eyes. If her father had come home early from work, that meant they wanted to talk to her about something. Normally, it would have been something she had no intention about talking to them about. They had already thought about the way she dressed, the music she liked, dating boys, staying out late, smoking cigarettes, and every other topic under the sun. "What's up?" Betsy Sue asked suspiciously as she reached the porch steps. "Your mother and I wanted to have a few words with you before dinner," Robert answered calmly in a very pleasant tone of voice. Betsy Sue looked into his eyes. She didn't see that parental look. Instead, both of her parents looked rather pleased with themselves. Betsy Sue remained cautious. It can never be a good thing for a teenager when both of your parents look pleased with themselves. "Put your books down and have a seat," Robert said, pointing to an empty swing across from them. Betsy Sue did as requested, still eyeing them both suspiciously. "Here, dear," Miss Mary Ellen said as she held out a cold glass of lemonade to her daughter. Betsy Sue accepted the glass and took a deep sip. Heavy necking left one a little parched, after all. Her parents smiled even larger. "Betsy Sue, you will be graduating soon. Your mother and I just wanted you to know that we are very proud of you." Robert reached over and squeezed Miss Mary Ellen's hand. Maybe this talk would be about a car or a trip or some other fabulous graduation present. Betsy Sue took another long sip of her lemonade. If she didn't know better, she would swear that this drink had just a little kick to it. "We have come to realize that you're not a little girl anymore. You are nearly a grown young lady and deserve to be treated as such." More hand squeezing and proud looks as Betsy Sue took another sip. She didn't want to rush them. She knew they would get to the point sooner or later. "However, dear," Miss Mary Ellen inserted, "we feel that you need to behave like a young lady before we can, in all good conscience, treat you like one." "Aha!" Betsy Sue rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. They would never figure out that this was her life and that she would do as she saw fit, and if they didn't like it." She lost her train of thought for a moment. She had started getting up a head of steam about something. She looked at her parents. They seemed to be staring expectantly at her. Oh, yes, argument, her life, graduation. Betsy Sue shook her head. Maybe it was the heat. She took another sip of the cool lemonade. Yep, she had to be right. This lemonade had a little kick to it. Her mother's voice wandered in from the lemonade-induced fog. "You see, Betsy Sue, we and all the parents in town agree. We can't have our children running around poorly dressed, smoking cigarettes, and driving fast with all that loud music. It's time for all of our young adults to be grown up and act properly," added her father. Betsy Sue's head swam, her legs lost all feeling. Her tongue wouldn't work. She watched as her mother took the glass from her hand. Eventually her grandmother came into view. Strangely, they all seemed to be looking down at her. The last words Betsy Sue thought she heard: "Wake up, proper respect, attitude adjustment." Betsy Sue sat on the front porch with her parents and grandparents in the heat of the long afternoon, seated in a comfortable porch chair next to the table holding the silver serving tray containing the pitcher of iced tea. She chatted idly while sipping from her glass. Her elders sat in opposite swings. They all dressed appropriately in cool linens and cottons. The sound of a car turning slowly into the drive attracted their collective attention. "Look, dear," Miss Mary Ellen advised, "that nice Donnie Connors has come calling. Step inside and get him a glass." "Yes, ma'am," Betsy Sue replied as she rose gracefully to her feet. As the car rolled to a respectful, quiet stop, all of the grown-ups looked at each other and smiled knowingly.